that plate removed, it exposes this hard point for you to jack the vehicle up. I don't like to jack it all the way up just yet until I get all the lug nuts loose. What I like to do is put a jack stand under the frame rail just for safety. Alright, once you have all the lug nuts removed, you should just be able to lift the tire off and expose the brake rotor and the caliper, and the pads are on the other side of the caliper. Now in this video I bought new brake rotors all the way around and new brake pads all the way around off Amazon for about 150 bucks. And I bought them from a company called Max Advanced off Amazon. And if you check the video description, I'll leave a link to those brake rotors and pads off Amazon. You probably have to configure Amazon settings for your specific vehicle. But if you look on Amazon, you can get a pretty good deal from Max Advanced. I've never used them, so hopefully at the end of this video will be after I've driven around on these brake pads for a month or so, and I'll tell you what I think about them. But that's what we're going to do, and make sure to check the video description for the brake pads if you're interested. So when we're taking the caliper off, what you don't want to happen is once we loosen everything up, you don't want the caliper to fall and hit the floor and put strain on your brake line hose. So what I like to do is just go ahead and take some rope and tie it kind of through here and make some sort of knot and just secure it up out of the way. So there's a couple of bolts that keep the caliper on, and one is right here and the other is right there. Both of them take a 14mm wrench. So I'll go ahead and take those bad boys off. Sometimes there's a nut on the back side that you may have to get a wrench and break. The bottom one broke without having to hold on to this nut, but it takes a 17mm wrench and you may have to hold on it to get it break. So once you have them broke loose, you can back out the screws and hold on to those. So the caliper is pretty much locked on to it because there is some residual compression from the last time you pressed the brakes. So we're going to have to relax the caliper in order for this thing to come off the rotor. You can do that using a C-clamp if you got a big enough one. In my situation, I barely do, but once you get it a good ways, you can back it off, go back and do the top. One thing I just noticed is my rope wasn't tied in the right spot, so before we go any further, once you compressed it, it should just slide right off and there you go, and expose the brake disc. Alright, next thing, to remove this bracket here so we can take our rotor off, we're going to have to remove these bolts back here. Hopefully you can see them, but here's one right here, here, and pretty sure that's it. So these two bolts. Those bolts take a 17 millimeter. Once you remove those two bolts, the bracket comes right off. You can set that aside for now. So now we're ready to remove and replace our rotor. On the rotor, you can see here there's some rust. It's probably not gonna want to just slide right off. Maybe yours does, but mine, I can tell it's not gonna want to do that. So what you're gonna need is to kind of take a rubber mallet and bang around the edges to break it free. Alright, so I finally got it off, and what it took was a little bit of heat, and I heated up the perimeter here, and then I took a rubber mallet to it, and it slid right off. So just a little it's a propane torch. So that's what it took. I haven't changed these rotors and pads in probably 50 or 60,000 miles, so they were on there pretty good, and you can see with the rust. So there you have it. So one thing to take note of is these clips do not come in the Max Advanced brake kit, so you'll probably need to make sure that you keep the clips in and don't destroy them. So that's how you take out the brake pad here, and the clip just removes or comes off the brake pad. Just be careful, make sure you don't lose it, almost like I did. But make sure you save the clips, and you can see the brake pads were, they still had some life in them, but it's good we're go ahead and replacing them. Make sure you take off the retaining clips as well, and let's do the other side. Looks like it doesn't have necessarily clip that goes with it. Begin to put the clips back on. And reinstall them. Put the clip back on. The double prong goes on the outside, and then just slide it in like that, and then go ahead and install your spring clips back. So you can set that right there. The next thing we're going to do is get the new rotor. So the new rotor looks pretty good. Looks to be the same size, and let's see if it mates up pretty good. So yeah, mates up just right. So the rotor looks pretty good. One thing I like to do before I put the rotor back on is put a little grease around that lip, so maybe next time I won't have to heat it up to get it off. I wouldn't apply much, just a little bit. Next, you're going to want to reinstall the brake pad bracket. To do that, make sure that everything is gonna take a couple of hands to do. Make sure everything's where it needs to be. And lined up. Make sure you can get them finger tight so that you're not gonna strip any threads here. With that, everything else looks pretty good. You're gonna want to apply some brake grease to here because that's going to be where the calipers, the pistons contact here, and if you apply a little bit of grease there, it'll help it not squeak whenever you hit the brakes. I want to apply some on this side as well. One last thing, you're going to want to tighten these down. 14 millimeter. I'm going to tighten them down really good. With that, you're ready to put your caliper back on. Before you put your caliper back on, you probably want to clamp it down all the way. Make sure the pistons are all the way recessed. And you can do that with a C-clamp. And really, as you can see, 3 pairs of hands. You might want to not untie it before you do this. That was probably a bad move on my part. But get the 2 screws back in there tight. I think these take a 12 millimeter. But get your 17 millimeter wrench out. Hold that side. Tighten it on down. Get it good and tight. That's a good sign that your rotor should spin freely, shouldn't be locked up, and you should be ready to put the wheel back on. And there you have it. That's how you do the front brakes on a 2009 Toyota Highlander. Next part of the video is going to be how to do the rear brakes. And thanks for watching.